Howdy, Possum Patty here, and I'm junk journaling. Today I'm going to work on the cover of my Halloween fall fantasy themed junk journal. I made this out of just some square pieces of cardboard, and I wanted to jazz up the cover. The first thing I put down was a little bit black gesso and the cover of a book in the haunted house. And on the back is a little bit of the back of the book in the haunted house. But I have lots of things here to use. And I want to put a piece of cheesecloth on here. Now I saw this at the dollar store and it was black, but I figured, you know what, I had some white and I want to use this up. And I'll just take this black gesso and paint it. And I have some orange mesh, and I have netting. And then I bought this the other day at the dollar store, and it's got spider webs on it. And I got a little bit of orange mesh from a bag of tangerines. And I've got some sparkly stickles and some pictures of houses. I want to replace the houses on the cover with two old houses that I used to live in. And I've got a black doily. I found this on clearance. It was $1.49. I paid 47 cents. And let's see. Oh yeah, and I have this bouquet of Halloween flowers. And I was going to figure out how to take one apart. And it came apart quite easily. All the pieces just pulled off. The eyeball pulled right off. And it was on the end of this plastic thing. And then once the eyeball was off, all the petals just came off. And the little plastic parts came off. Because with these plastic parts, it's just going to be too hard to glue it down. So now I can glue the petals down separately and put the eyeball back in. And it'll be flat against, well, not really flat, but flatter against the cover. I'm going to do that. And then there's a spider on here, and I wanted to get the spider on the front cover also. So I'm going to work out a plan, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to be doing something like this. This is probably not what it'll look like when it's done, but just to give myself an idea, I like this mesh with the spider webs, and I want to put a spider. I love these purple roses with the eyeball, so I want that to go on the front. And maybe a little bit of this orange mesh. And this I'm going to paint black, put some black gesso on that. And I cut these off the bouquet, and I want to put them around the house. Now this is an old house that we used to live in, and it was haunted. This is our Cheshire Street house. We haven't lived there in quite a while. But when we first bought it, we knew it was old, but we didn't know exactly how old it was. We had some friends came over, and one day our friend Millie came over, and I was showing her the house. And this house had about 13 rooms in it. And we took her around the first floor, and then I was showing her the upstairs. And we got to the back rooms in the upstairs, and I was explaining about the rooms, and I turned around and she wasn't there. And I said, my gosh, where did she go? So I ran back downstairs, and there she was downstairs. And I asked her, what happened? And she said that when she was upstairs, she felt a spirit in the house. she said now it wasn't a spirit that wished to do you harm, but nevertheless it was a spirit in the house. And she said it was a girl, a young girl, and it gave her the chills. And so she ran downstairs. Now this is black gesso. I just want to make a black spot to cover up the old house so I can put the new picture on. So this is the house that I'm talking about. And where was I? Oh yeah, so then we talked and had tea and cake, whatever, and then she left. And then about a week or so later, I had another friend over, and this was my hairdresser, and I was showing him the house because we just bought the house. And we went around the first floor. Everything was fine. We went upstairs to the second floor. Again, here's the house. We went upstairs to the second floor, and then we headed towards the back of the house. And I was telling him about the room, same thing again, and I turned around, and he was gone. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I went downstairs. He was downstairs. He's actually out of the house. He was outside. And I said, what happened? And he said, when we got to that part of the house, he felt a spirit in the house. And it wasn't, like a harmful spirit, but it was a young girl. And it gave him, the heebie-jeebies, so he had to leave. So he actually went right out of the house. So now this was two people at two different times that this happened, and they both had the same story, that it was a young girl and she wasn't trying to be harmful or anything. It was just a spirit in the house. So I was kind of like, oh my goodness. Then a few months after that, a lady came knocking on my door, and she said, I'm putting some matte medium. There's my bird clock. It is now cardinal o'clock. That's the cardinal singing. Anyway, so this lady came to the door, and she was selling books that her family had made, and it was about all the old houses in the neighborhood, because it was a really old neighborhood, and she wanted to know if I wanted to buy this little book because my house was in it. And I said sure, and I bought a book, and I started reading through it and how it was a stagecoach route, and there was an old schoolhouse and some farmhouses and I think a general store, a couple other things in the neighborhood, and the stagecoach would come through and people would stay overnight there. And then I had a little story about all the houses. So I was reading the story about my house. And apparently in my house back in the 1800s, there lived a family, and this family used to host a local school teacher because she lived out of town, so she stayed with them during the week and she went home on the weekend on the stagecoach. And they had a little girl, and apparently the little girl died of the black fever, they called it, the black fever. So some kind of plague she died of. And they said after the little girl died, her mother went a little bit crazy. And they determined at that time, this was the 1800s, that the mother went crazy because she kept feeling the spirit of her little girl that had died in the house. Now should I put this across the spine too? And boy, did that creep me out. not only that, we had a cat, and we were sitting upstairs in the TV room, and the cat would look off into that direction of the house, and the hair on its back would raise up straight. There was something in that part of the house that the cat did not like. And not only that, the cat, I let my son name the cat, and he was, you know, like in first or second grade at the time. I said, what do you want to name the cat? And he said, Georgia. And I said, oh, that's a nice name. Where'd you hear that name from? He said, oh, I don't know. And come to find out that that was the name of the little girl who had died in the house. And not only that, the teacher who used to stay with them wrote a poem about the little girl, and she was buried in a cemetery about 1 block away from the house, and she wrote a poem about her walking through the city of the dead. Okay, this is still a little wet, but I'm building up layers like a mixed media, and I put down this web mesh with some matte gel, and I did the same thing to a little bit of cheesecloth around this edge here, and then I put some blackened gesso on it, and then I took my finger, my fingers are all dirty here, and put some of this iridescent rich silver heavy body acrylic paint to grunge it up a little bit. And now I am working on sort of like a little cluster to put a picture of the house. I might put some of this orange mesh and a little bit of purple material, which will go with the purple flower in the corner, and then put the picture of the house on that, and leave some room for my flower in the corner. So I'm going to work on that. Well, I went down into the archives to look for that book that I was just talking about, The History of Cheshire Street and Vicinity, 1694 to 1971. And this is a picture of the house here. And it said it was built sometime before 1858 and was occupied by George and his wife Nancy Ives Baker, where they had 2 children, Fred and Georgia. Georgia died in 1878 at the age of 15 of black diphtheria, leaving a bad impression on her mother, which showed up in her later years. And it just gives some more history about who the house went to. And then on this page is a picture of the cemetery. The following is a poem written and composed by Belle Clark while teaching on Cheshire Street sometime before 1900. This was written in memory of Georgia Baker, who died in 1878 at the age of 15. Wandering alone at twilight in the city of the dead, pausing to dry a falling tear, then onward with quiet tread. Ah, here's a baby's grave, a low and grassy mound, but in that green and mossy spot a mother's heart is bound. A mother often kneels there as the sun sinks in the west, and sings in low and plaintive tones the songs her child loved best. Again I pause, only 15 is traced on the tablet fair. The pride of someone's household is calmly resting there. Georgia Baker. Well, I didn't stop too many times while I was finishing up my cover. My hands were just too full of black gesso and matte medium and glue and paint to keep turning the camera on and off. But here we go. Here's my spider, which I glittered him up quite a bit and put him on a piece of orange mesh. And there's the haunted house on a piece of purple material, and 2 of the dead branches from my Halloween bouquet, and I added a little more glitter to that. And there's my flower with the eyeball, and I put the black leaves behind it and with just a little touch of green glitter. And of course the spine, I'll have some sewing on the spine and probably add beads and things. And on the back, I just cut out some of the spider webs from the mesh and glued them around the page, and I put a picture of another house we had lived in on the back, and then I put jewels in the center of the spider web. This is the house where the scary ones hide. Open the door and step softly inside. Is someone behind them? They're too scared to look, but you'll know for sure after reading this book. And I did put a little purple jewel in the center of all the little spider webs in the front of the cover there. So I just want to thank you for coming along today, and happy junk journaling. Bye-bye now. And there's the finished product. A very sparkly In the Haunted House Halloween memory keeper.